Welcome back, everyone. Today we are continuing our discussion about the CIA declassified document, the Gateway Process. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about the hologram. We are going to be talking about space-time. We are going to be talking about out-of-body experiences, intervening dimensions, the so-called absolute, and more. So get ready, grab yourself a hot or cold beverage, and let's get right into it. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Riley Finwood, and this is As Within, So Without. I am your host. Let me take a quick sip of soda here. Hold on. That new and improved intro song you just listened to, my good friend Larry Frame, very talented audio engineer, helped me remix the whole thing. He's also now editing these podcasts for me. He recommended I get this brand new mic that you were listening to my voice that you can hear my voice through right now. 10 out of 10, Larry. Welcome aboard. Welcome to the team. You're very much appreciated around here. You're very helpful, very talented, amazing, wonderful, stunning, show-stopping. Anyway, he's blushing. I can hear him blush from miles away. So I recorded this intro last week, not this one. Let me start over again. I had an intro recorded for this episode, and I re-listened to it, and it was the angstiest, most brooding intro I had ever heard. I was in a funk that day. I was in a mood. It was raining. You know, in the moment, I felt really zen or whatever. It felt really nice to just talk to you, you know? Open up a little bit. And then I re-listened to it, and I was just like, dang, you're just being a sad sack today, aren't you? I deleted the whole thing, and for the first few minutes of me talking about Mr. Bentov here in a second, you can kind of hear it in my voice a little bit. So hopefully I did y'all a favor. We're all going through it right now, aren't we? It's, the world is crumbling, I tell you what. But you know what? They are releasing stuff about aliens, which is very exciting for someone like me who loves the idea of extraterrestrials, who loves the idea that UFOs have been here and are continuing to come here and are baffling the government. I don't think they're baffled. I think they're trying to release it to us in little tiny snack bites while we're all distracted by other chaotic things. But this means that I am going to dig into all of these released documents, all of this unclassified, declassified information, and give it to you in future episodes. So I'm very excited about that. And in the meantime, I have this episode for you. It is a continuation of last time. We are continuing to talk about the CIA declassified document, the Gateway Process. And you know what? Let's just jump right in. Let's just jump right in, folks. So last episode, I sort of glossed over a man named Itzhak Bentov. He was considered the brains of the operation. So I went back and I did a little more research on him, and there's a lot to talk about there. So let's just get started on Mr. Bentov. I think he offers a lot of good background about this document, a lot of good context. So here's a little bit what I learned about Itzhak. I am not responsible for mispronouncing his name. I apologize. Well, I am responsible for it, but I'm doing the best that I can, all right? So, he was born in 1923. He is Czechoslovakian, born Israeli-American scientist, inventor, mystic, and author. He had a lab in his basement. He did a lot of experiments about the nature of consciousness. He was the guy. He was obsessed with the nature of consciousness, a lot like I am, except I don't have a lab. I have a studio. His invention was a seismographic device to record the heartbeat, in particular the aorta's reverberations. So during normal breathing, the reverberations in the aorta are out of phase with the heartbeat, and the system is inharmonious. However, during meditation, when the breath is held, the echo off the bifurcation of the aorta is in resonance with the heartbeat, and the system becomes synchronized, thus utilizing a minimum amount of energy. This resonant beat is approximately 7 cycles per second, which corresponds not only to the alpha rhythm of the brain, but also the low-level magnetic pulsations of the earth. I talked about that a little bit last time, where if you can get your heartbeat to resonate at a certain, cycles per second, the entire vibration of your body resonates with that of the earth, which is pretty cool. So he invented the device with which he can measure that. More interesting facts about him: his parents were killed in Nazi concentration camps. He narrowly escaped being sent to the camps, and he moved to British Palestine. Despite not having a degree, he joined the Israeli Science Corps. The Science Corps later became a military branch known as the Hebrew acronym HEMED, H-E-M-E-D. And in 1954, he immigrated to the U.S., settled in Massachusetts, and became naturalized in 1962. From there, he began a workshop in the basement of a Catholic church in Massachusetts. In 1967, he built the catheter I was talking about. And somehow he got involved with the CIA. And now we're here. So, interesting fact, he died in a plane crash. 1979, he was a passenger aboard the American Airlines Flight 191, which crashed at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. I looked up pictures of that, and there are quite graphic pictures. I don't recommend looking at those. I get easily triggered by accidents and stuff like that, so it was kind of hard for me to look at. But yeah, it was pretty scary. I think one of the engines just stopped working on one of the wings, and it just spiraled out. Like it was on takeoff, and it didn't even make it into the sky really. And yeah, I don't know if everyone died on that accident. I'm pretty sure everybody died. But yeah, pretty scary. Anyway, that's Bentov. He was the one in charge of this whole thing. Not in charge. It was the captain who was in charge. He was in charge of the study part, the experiments. So let's get into it here. As I said last time, we talked about how the CIA likens our universe to a hologram, and we will delve back into that in a minute. But in order to make the path a little more clear, we do need to define how our consciousness works according to this document, according to Bentov. And as I sort of go along in my podcast, I'm going to be talking about the nature of consciousness almost constantly. It's been something I have been obsessed with for years. And I remember, drinking with my friends back in college, and I would get on long tangents and rants about the nature of consciousness, and they would all roll their eyes at me eventually, because I get this crazy look in my eye, when this sort of subject comes up. And I just, I also started a TikTok, sort of summarizing a lot of these concepts, because a lot of those Gen Z TikTok kids are really obsessed with this document right now. For some reason, it's really in the zeitgeist. There's some kids on there, saying how I shouldn't get involved in the comments. I know better, but geez, something about a good discussion, a good discourse really gets me. You know what I mean? Talking about how consciousness resides in the brain. I really don't think consciousness resides in the brain. We don't know what consciousness is the bottom line. We have a lot of good guesses, but we have no way of proving it. It's sort of like the nature of reality itself. We have a lot of good theories and guesses about the nature of reality, but it's not something that is possible for us to prove right now where we are in science. But I think that's what makes it so exciting to me. The world is wide open right now. It is so exciting to me. We're learning new stuff every day. The beautiful thing about science to me is it is flexible. It is fluid. I mean, we used to think we were the center of the universe. We used to think the earth was flat. These things change. Anyway, Consciousness and energy. Let's get into that. It first defines that matter and energy are not separate things. We tend to think of matter as solid and energy as a force of some sort. If we look at matter in its smaller forms, however, we find that atomic structures are oscillating energy grids, so to speak. In this podcast, I talk a lot about quantum theory, quantum mechanics. This goes back to episode 1, in which we talked about our lovely superposition. I think I spent about 15 minutes talking about superposition, but it's in short, how electrons don't exist in a particular place until an observer collapses the waveform with the mere act of observation. So, in essence, the CIA here is claiming that solid matter just doesn't exist because everything is in a state of vibration or between particle and waveform. This isn't anything new, but it is something that needs to be restated. So, holograms. Let's get into hologram because on my sweet little TikTok community that I'm starting to build, people are actually really afraid of this concept. It's scary upon first glance, and I remember talking about, last time how it was scary and how I didn't like it. But as I read through this document, and as I sort of got a better understanding of what they mean by it, it's not so scary. So let me just explain what I mean here. So as I described in the last episode, a hologram in this case is likened to, say you drop some pebbles into a bowl of water, you freeze the water just as the ripples form on the surface, and you shine a laser light through the ice disk and get an exact replica of the pebbles in the bowl of water expressed in another dimensional form. You get a hologram when an energy field at rest, the ice disk, interacts with an energy field in motion or the laser beam. So what they really mean by this is that energy is made up of interactions between energy fields at rest and energy fields in motion. The universe is just made up of very complex interactions of this kind. That's what they mean by hologram, which, when explained that way, it's a lot less scary. The important thing we need to remember here is that in order to create holograms, you need energy in motion. And this will come up again and again as I talk about this, but they go on to discuss how human consciousness is its own hologram, which interacts with the universal hologram in order to form perceptions and thoughts. When we talk about this in terms of altering your consciousness to enter alternate dimensions, here's how that works. Energy passes through the universal hologram and is perceived by the electrostatic fields of the human mind. We can read this energy if the amplitude and frequency of our personal consciousness can harmonize with that of the universal hologram energy passing through it. So think vibration here. Even if we are to receive information from the universe in this way, we need to compare this data to ourselves in order to fully comprehend it. This means that we need to compare this new info with our memory banks to make sense of it. Psychologist Keith Floyd says, contrary to what everyone else knows is so, it may not be the brain that produces consciousness, but rather consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. So basically, if we were to superimpose a 3D grid system over our heads, this would represent the interaction between the universe and our own consciousness. They have a very poorly drawn picture of this diagram in the document itself. I'll paste that in the show notes for you. They got a couple of good drawings in there. They're really not good drawings, and it makes me laugh to think that this is an official document. But it's good to look at when we get into the cosmic egg section specifically. It's good to have a reference because it's hard to explain what it looks like. It's hard to explain how the universe is in general, but we're going to try. I'm going to do my very best. So back to this 3D grid. Say you put a 3D grid over your head. This would represent the interaction between the universe and our own consciousness. In order for us to understand what's happening around us, so in order for us to perceive, we have to translate the 3D information into 2D form. So think computers, think zeros and ones, our little binary computer systems. It's called go, no-go systems. So we have to literally break it down and compare it to things we already know from our memory in order to take in new information and process it. So we can only perceive by comparison is what it's saying, which makes a lot of sense. So why is this so seemingly groundbreaking? According to Marilyn Ferguson, author of The Aquarian Conspiracy, which is connected to the New Age movement, which honestly is pretty amazing that they're even referencing this in a document like this, I think. She says, this is an all-encompassing model that is generating excitement generating excitement among those intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness. This holographic model marries brain research to the theoretical physics. It accounts for normal perception and simultaneously takes the paranormal and transcendental experiences out of the supernatural by explaining them as part of nature. Like certain discoveries of quantum physics, the radical reorientation of this theory suddenly makes sense of paradoxical sayings of mystics throughout the ages. So basically, she's saying it's groundbreaking because things that are supernatural, paranormal, they're no longer supernatural, paranormal, they're natural and normal. They are a part of human experience. It's normalizing things that we normally find taboo and honestly kind of just crazy out there, which I think is very important going forward. Then we get into stuff about self-cognition. Basically, this differentiates humans from plants and animals by means of we not only know, but we know that we know. We can monitor the process of our own thinking and maintain an awareness of it. So we can make comparative assessments, evaluating the function of our own thought processes against the various objective standards we have adopted. Interesting fact, they talk about humans in the third person here. They say, evaluating the functioning of their own thought processes against the various objective standards they have adopted. Which to me is super funny because it makes them sound like aliens studying humans. Which, who knows, that might be the case. Who am I to say? Send me an email if you believe the CIA are a bunch of aliens. I have proof in the show notes. I'm kidding, I don't have proof. I'm an alien. How about that? Got him. So basically, we can duplicate pieces of our own holograms, project them out, perceive that projection, compare it with a memory from our memory banks where our standards of measurement are stored, and measure the difference using 3D geometry, and then go, no-go binary code to yield verbal, cognitive, blah, 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 blah. This is a long-winded way of saying we project out our own hologram, our own consciousness, examine it, compare it to the hologram of what's going on around us, simplify it, and that's how we can understand things. We're basically computers. Our brains are basically computers, and this wasn't in the document. It's just sort of a thought that I had. So maybe our minds are like our computers we have right now, is the standard zeros and ones binary code computers, and our consciousness is quantum computing. Quantum computing, what is that? Well, that is, ladies and gentlemen, a mode of computing that going beyond the 0 and 1 code, in which that quantum computing can be both zeros and ones at the same time. Like superposition. I'm sorry I'm so obsessed with superposition, but I'm going to talk about it all the time. Shoot me an email. What do you think? Hit me up on Facebook. What do you think? Instagram. I got all of them. I think I just set up a Discord too, actually, which you can't get to yet. Okay, anyway, let's stick with me through this next section because we're going to get a real conceptual here. They say in order to define the actual gateway process, I'm sorry it's taken so long to get to the actual gateway process. There's a lot of concepts we need to wade through before we get to that, which it's going to be worth the wait, trust me. So we need to define time and space in order to get a better understanding of the dimension that we exist in so that we can conceptualize how to transcend our own dimension. So time and space, pretty straightforward, but I'm just going to go ahead and go through it just for the sake of it. Time. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force in motion. In other words, it is a measurement of change. Space is simply put as a location in this respect. So, intersect space and time, that's where you are in this moment. However, in order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited or confined in some way, because if not, it would be considered infinity. And infinity is not in motion because, well, it's infinity. Nothing is beyond it. This is called force without limit, without dimension, without limits of form. Therefore, it is outside of the dimension of time and space. The energy in this state is called the absolute, or it's what this document calls the absolute. So key points about the absolute. Energy here is completely at rest. So what does that mean? It cannot generate holograms because holograms require what? A force in motion interacting with a force at rest. So it maintains consciousness insofar that it can receive and perceive holograms from the material 3D world and other dimensions, but it cannot enact change from itself because there are no holograms being created there. We cannot perceive the absolute, although technically the absolute exists all around us, within us, outside of us, because it is outside time and space. It's everywhere. We can, however, experience the various intervening dimensions between our reality and the absolute by altering our consciousness. So this is where we get into where we're actually going, where our consciousness goes when we do the gateway process. We're not going to the absolute. We can't go there until we die. That's basically the space we existed in before we were born and the space we're going to exist in when we die. We can't really go there until we're dead. But what we can do is go to these intervening dimensions. And I have a theory that what they're talking about is the astral plane. And I'm sure there's many other dimensions that I don't have a name for, but they don't ever mention the astral plane. They don't ever mention astral projection in this document. What they do say is out-of-body experiences. But that's what a lot of people are talking about when they're talking about out-of-body is astral projection. So anyway, we can theoretically expand our consciousness up to the point of the absolute until perception stops. And why does it stop? Because no holograms are being generated in the absolute, because it is energy at complete and total rest. So what are these intervening dimensions? Let's talk about that for a little while. First, we have to understand that the absolute isn't necessarily someplace far off that we can reach. It is beyond space and time, which means that it pervades through our dimension and all others. We just can't perceive it. These dimensions are in motion to and from the absolute, or better said, becoming separated with. I'm not quite sure how to unpack that one. Anyway, it's hard to visualize, but I like to visualize just sort of little pieces of the absolute breaking off and then becoming real form in the material world. And it's like the in-between. It's like the absolute becoming material. But again, I don't know. That's just my reading of it. Anyway, this movement in and out creates gradients or spots of a little of both, I assume. So yeah, I mean, I'm having a hard time with this section for a reason. It's very vague and it's very short. So I'm making a lot of assumptions here. And I'm assuming this section is vague for them as well because I'm not sure where they're getting this information from. They don't talk about at all how they're getting this information. They don't talk about the experiments themselves. They only talk about the gateway process, the experiments that goes on with that. I'm guessing all of this stuff here is theoretical. And in order for this, whole sort of document to make sense, they have to have this as a platform of this is their theory. And without this theory, the process wouldn't have any ground to stand on, so to speak. And like I said before, they have to keep it vague in order to not step on any toes of any religions and things like that. So I guess it makes sense. Feels a little manipulative, but of course it does. This is the CIA we're talking about. Anyway, so to enter one of these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus with such intense coherence to the frequency of energy pattern, that's necessary to speed up to that point. So if we were to look at oscilloscope, if you're a musician like me, you know what this is. It's the when you're speaking into a microphone, there's like this little plug-in you can use, and it shows you the vibrations of your own voice. That's an oscilloscope. So you have to get your frequency to a point where it's almost a solid line. The frequency has to be... So, okay, let's talk about amplitude and frequency. Some of you guys might zone out here, but I love this sort of thing. Amplitude, if you think of a wave, and we're going to mention this again because it's actually a very important concept. If you think of a wave, it goes up and down and up and down. The higher and lower it goes, that's the amplitude. That in sound, that's the volume, basically. And frequency is how many times it passes the line of equilibrium. So sort of how fast it's oscillating. The higher the frequency, the more times it passes up and down over that line of equilibrium. So going off of that, there's something that we need to talk about called Planck's distance. Planck's. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics that basically says that any oscillating frequency, such as your brainwaves, reaches 2 points of complete rest in its oscillation. Once when it oscillates all the way up to the top of the wave, and once when it's at the bottom. So let me try and explain this in simpler terms. The wave I was talking about goes up and down and up and down. So say you throw a ball into the air. It's going to come to one small moment of complete rest at the top before it starts to fall down again, right? That's what it's talking about. The oscillations have 2 points of complete rest, once at the very, very top of the wave and once at the very, very bottom while it's changing direction. There's a split second of complete rest. And what is complete rest? The complete rest is the absolute. So this energy literally blinks out of existence for just a little tiny little piece of time. It rejoins with infinity for just a itty bitty tiny little second. This small window is called Planck's distance. Stick with me here. So in order for us to take advantage of this, we need to take the points of rest in our brain. We need them to be so close together, so frequent that it maintains a continuity. You know, think of a flip book of illustrations. You know, what you're doing is you just have a bunch of pictures, no movement at all. But when you flip through a bunch, it creates the illusion of movement. This is what we're talking about here. Since we can't exist in the absolute and perceive it, what we have to do is take little snapshots of it and sort of let our brains read in, like fill in the blanks. You know what I mean? This is so cool to me. This is the point in the document when I was like, whoa. So this is how we're able to form memories of being out of dimension. We don't actually, you know, exist there and swim around in the absolute, but we can get a good idea of what it's like there, which is so cool to me. So a direct quote from the paper here: human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey to Wonderland. Interesting thought. So now we are going to get into out-of-body experiences just a little bit. So let's say you've trained your consciousness to see into the intervening dimensions between us and the infinity. According to Bentov, it would look pretty jerky, grainy, or chunky, sort of like that flip book thing I mentioned earlier. This is because we are literally blinking in and out of space-time. How cool is that? Essentially, in time-space, space and time are correlated in a predictable manner. You know, it's the waveforms, the up and down, the tick and tock. It's very predictable. You know, we got this grid here, and wherever your point is on the grid is where you are in space and time. Pretty straightforward. But in the in-between dimensions, things are a little more wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, so to speak, and space and time are not always correlated or respond to each other like we would predict. So in order to enhance this experience, they begin to talk about what I can only assume is astral projection. Again, they don't say astral projection. So we're just going to have to, I'm going to make a jump here and just say that that's what they're talking about, because that's what astral projection is. Your consciousness is leaving your body. This is just the focusing of your consciousness outside of your physical form. The reason behind this is basically the closer you get to the right frequency, you need to be oscillating. It creates a better foundation basically so that you can see more clearly, or I shouldn't say see, I should say perceive. So this goes back to the theory we talked about last time about how the brain will naturally try to tune itself to its surrounding frequencies. If you are starting from a higher or closer match in oscillation, it becomes easier to maintain and go higher. So in essence, you can get glimpses of these intervening dimensions in a really deep meditative state. You know how we talked about last time, you can go into hypnosis and stuff. But they're saying it's a lot easier to go there and stay there, or have a stronger flip book if your consciousness is no longer in your physical body. We're going to take a quick break real quick. And I am back. I tell you what, guys, it is so hot in this room. I don't have central air. What I have is a window unit. So I have to turn it off while I record, because you guys would be able to hear the incessant whirring of my window unit. The issue is, this is the time in Virginia that we call the Devil's Front Porch, late July, early August time. It is so hot and humid. And I turned that thing off for 20 minutes, and it felt so good before I turned it off. And I turned it off for, oh God, it's been 40 minutes. Jesus. Anyway, it's now hot and sticky. It's my favorite TikTok time. My favorite TikTok is this guy. He's just talking into the camera. He says, "People ask me all the time, are you gay? Are you straight? Are you straight? Are you gay? It doesn't matter. You're too sticky. I'm in a relationship with the moon." That describes me so well. I'm too sticky. Continuing on, pushing through. So now we are going to talk about the cosmic egg. Everybody excited for this part? This is a good part. So this section basically talks about how the cosmic egg theory of the universe, which postulates that our reality moves forward in time on the shell of this giant egg, which acts essentially like a torus. And a lot of you will know what a torus is, but I will post a picture of one in the show notes. It is basically a giant self-contained spiral of energy. So basically, galaxies farther away from us are accelerating. So this theory states that those galaxies eventually fold in on themselves and fall into this black hole at the tip of the egg and go back into the infinite energy. And then this energy is spewed back out into the eggshell in a big bang on the other side of the egg through this white hole. So there's a picture of this cosmic egg in the show notes. Again, it's very poorly drawn, but it's endearing to me, so I'll post it on there for you. They also think that we are closer to the black hole side of the egg, the closer to the point where the universe is going to end, essentially, go back to the absolute, and then we're going to come back out in the Big Bang on the other side. Sounds so violent. Jesus, I just want rest, y'all. I just want to sleep just for a little while. Anyway, we're supposedly coming up on the last leg of our race here, which could be billions and billions and billions of years. I don't know the scale of time here. I mean, this has been the longest 40 minutes of my life. You've had to listen to me for this long, right? Riley, that wasn't funny. Stop trying so hard to be funny. You're not funny. I am funny. I'm too sticky. Okay, moving on. Continuing on, we are marching on. So, I mean, what I'm doing here is I'm just going through each section and summarizing it for you. So, this section is called Quality of Consciousness. So we're going back here to the out-of-body concept. This involves projecting a major portion of our own energy patterns so that this may move freely through the terrestrial sphere. This is to gain access to information from other dimensions outside of time and space or other forms of consciousness within our universe. When consciousness reaches a state of sophistication where it can perceive itself, its own hologram, it reaches self-cognition. Humans have this, as well as the absolute, but there are some differences. In the case of the absolute, it is a function of energy associated with infinity or omniscience. When energy returns to the absolute, it returns to a state of rest, in the continuum of consciousness in the pool of limitless, timeless perception that resides there. The more complex the energy in the material plane, i.e. human consciousness, the more it is able to maintain its own reality. Our consciousness is merely a differentiated aspect of the universal consciousness of the absolute. So we are the absolute. We are just the absolute perceiving itself in a different way. It makes up our physical bodies, our minds, our flesh vessels, but it is distinct and superior to it. Consciousness exists both within and without the material plane of time and space. Reality has a beginning and an end, but the absolute does not. And when reality ends, it simply returns back to the infinity or to complete rest. Yes, complete rest. It sounds so nice. I got a new microphone. Do you guys like it? I think it brings out a little bit of bass in my voice, and now I can do ASMR. So just relax. Let's go to the let's go to the absolute together. Sounds romantic. I'm dead. I'm sorry, y'all. I can't. I'm in a relationship with the moon. I can't cheat on the moon. All right, so I'm going to get to one more section here, and then I'm going to call it This time flew by for me. So next time we are going to talk about the actual gateway method, and I cannot wait for that. But anyway, let's talk about this one last thing, consciousness in perspective. So what happens when we go back to the absolute? What happens when we die? Wouldn't we all like to know? Well, here it is. Since memory is a function of consciousness and is therefore eternal, basically we keep all of our memories when we die. The consciousness which makes up I am does not get deleted, so to speak, but rather it merges with the absolute without losing the separate identity. What it does lose is its capacity to generate more thought holograms, as the absolute is at complete rest. The creation of holograms requires movement. You retain the power to perceive, but lose free will or choice. In exchange, you get access to the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness. Consequently, in the case of out-of-body experiences or astral projection, you are projecting that eternal spark of consciousness that plays with and learns from dimensions both inside and outside the time-space world. Amazing, Mr. Bentov. Thank you for your knowledge. Anyway, what do y'all think about this? This stuff is very exciting for me. Again, this came out in 2003. Very exciting that it is just now coming back into the human zeitgeist. I should be surprised that it is, but I'm not, because 2020, I'm just not surprised by anything anymore. We're just getting all the truth coming out now. Anyway, I want you guys to send me in questions. I'm going to start answering them next time. I already have a couple. Interact. Hit me up. You'll find out where in just a second. Like I said, I'm going to be starting a Discord server. I have a YouTube channel up as well. I think I'm going to start doing some video recordings. I am going to, as I get more interviews, I think I might do some face-to-face sort of interview style stuff like that, like Joe Rogan. I hate that those words just came out of my mouth, like Joe Rogan. Anyway, I'm not going to get started about Joe Rogan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my window unit back on and take a nap. All right, y'all, I will catch you next time. We are going to finish up this document, and we are going to talk about how to go to the intervening dimensions. Stick with me. Peace out, y'all.
Thanks for listening to As Within, So Without. Visit us at aswithinSoWithoutPodcast.com for extra content such as blog posts, show notes, and more. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, you can contact Riley directly at riley@aswithinsowithoutpodcast.com. And if you haven't done so yet, please like and subscribe to As Within, So Without on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again for listening.